Okay, great. Well, I'm Jill Stanton. I'm the Executive Director for the Bremerton Housing Authority. I have been here for 2 years now. I came from King County Housing Authority prior to this job, but before that I was with Everett Housing Authority for 14 years. So I've spent most of my professional career in affordable housing, primarily working for Public Housing Authority. It feels like we're in a room of greatness here after hearing all of your vast experience in education. So I'm super happy to be here. Heather is also new. I'll let her introduce herself, but it's been quite the experience here in Kitsap County, and there's been a lot of challenges with affordable housing, but I'm super excited that we've been able to make a huge difference just in my time here, and looking forward to the future here. So.
I'm Heather Blough, and I'm the Executive Director of Housing Kitsap, formerly known as Kitsap County Consolidated Housing Authority. I know it has a sort of torrid history, and some of you may know, and some of you may not. I came about a year and a half ago, June 14th, 2021, to be exact. We had a lot of work that needed to be done and catch up that needed to be done, and I'm happy to say that that work has been done and we are current. So that's my biggest, success currently, but now we're looking to the future to continue our mission. My background actually is in housing authority. I retired from the housing authority in California after 30 years working for that housing authority. I administered the public housing, the Section 8 program, permits for the housing, HUD Dash, many HUD programs. This housing authority is different in that it also has many other types of programs, such as tax credits and rural development, which are also, some of them are subsidized and some of them aren't. So I'm looking forward to, I'm actually very interested because my dad is a retired educator. He's very politically active when he lives in California. So to hear all of these educators, former educators, yeah. I'm like, oh, that's where dad got it. So it's exciting to hear your experience and that you are working on behalf of the community. Thank you for having us. Can I just say one thing? The partnership that Jill and I are developing is actually a fantastic partnership for all of Kitsap County. Jill's housing authority is in the city of Bremerton, and Housing Kitsap covers the entire county except for the city of Bremerton. So we have been working together since day one. And I feel like the fact that the two housing authorities are working together so closely can have a very positive impact on the whole entire community. And that's says a lot about Jill's leadership.
Yeah, well, and I would just agree. Like, we meet every week, which I don't think happened before us with the leadership. Yeah, and it's been, we know that we can make a difference here, but we're stronger together. And so it has, and when Heather said, a little bit about Housing Kitsap, she's not tooting her own horn here, but she has cleaned that place up, and it's a miracle. I mean, it's really outstanding. So we're each other's biggest fans, and it's been fun working with her. So we're excited. This is our first time, I think,
presenting
together. Yeah. So this is, can everybody see that? It looks like it. Okay. So as we stated, we're the two housing authorities, the only housing authorities in Kitsap County. Both of us are new to our positions, relatively new, but we're the executive directors. We just wanted to start with our vision and our mission. I'm not going to read through them, but both of us, it's slightly different wording, but the gist of it is that we're here to do affordable housing, and we're very committed to the people that we serve, both the residents and the program participants in Kitsap County. We have huge visions. These statements may change over the years because they're prior to our experience here, but that being said, is we really envision a future where affordable housing is at the front of Kitsap County's attention. And so this slide, I just wanted, a lot of people wonder, who is our clientele? So housing authorities, we're showing this slide, we're kind of in this box in the middle. So we're not primarily working with the homeless or the emergency shelters or transitional housing. The people that we serve are really in a market where they're either rent burdened or they are extremely low income, but they have a level of stability that's a bit higher than the homeless. We do serve the homeless. We have preferences for homeless in our programs, but we are not a permanent supportive care agency. So we don't have social workers. We don't have people that do medical or mental health services. But our primary mission is to serve people that need housing, but they have to have a certain level of being able to be successful in housing without a lot of support from the housing authority. That being said, we work really closely with other agencies that provide those types of supports to ensure that the people that we serve are successful, but that is not actually what the housing authority is doing. Our mission is actually to provide the hard unit of housing, whether it be from housing that we own or through the voucher program.
Jill,
Yes.
so you'll probably cover this later, but you said you work closely with other agencies in the county. Could you just?
Sure. Yeah. So we work really closely with Kitsap County Resources. We also work really closely with, with Kitsap Mental Health Services, and also with Peninsula Community Health Services. We also are in close, work closely with several nonprofits that do affordable housing. How about you guys?
The same, but I think what you perhaps forgot is the HUD-VASH program comes with support. So they also work for their HUD-VASH vouchers. They also work with the veteran social workers.
Yeah, that's true. We do. So we have the VASH vouchers, and we also have foster youth independence vouchers, and those come with money for social services as well. And again, the housing authority doesn't provide those services, but other organizations in our community do.
Okay, you're saying the HUD, what program?
The
VASH.
the veterans.
So there's the housing choice voucher, and within that there's HUD-VASH, which is the veterans supportive housing program, and that's a partnership.
Okay.
And then the FYI,
Foster youth independence.
that's another voucher program that comes with supportive services tied to it.
Okay.
So this is kind of this slide. We're just showing kind of what the programs are that we work with. So I'll, and if this is information you already know, please don't let me just go on. But that Bremerton Housing Authority has the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So this is the program where our clients actually have a voucher and they go out into the private sector and they locate housing that they rent, and the housing authority pays a portion of their rent. Housing Kitsap also has a voucher program right now. Bremerton Housing Authority administers their program, and between both of us, we have almost 2,500 vouchers. We also have public housing. That's another primary program of HUD. Public housing is where there's actually a hard unit that is owned by the housing authority, and so we serve as the landlord. To get into both of those programs, our clients have to get on a wait list, and as units or vouchers become available, there's always exceptions, but primarily as they become available, we choose from the wait list, and people, if they're qualified, will move into a public housing unit, or they will get a voucher. And these are two separate programs. They don't really mix. So if you're in public housing, you could switch to another public housing unit, but you couldn't necessarily get a voucher, and vice versa.
You said 2,500
We have about 2,500 vouchers between us.
and they're all taken.
No. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about
Okay.
this, but
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
they are not all
No, they're-
taken. And
yeah.
so this has actually been one of our biggest goals in the last 2 years. So when I came to Bremerton Housing Authority had almost 1,900 vouchers. And of those 1,900, there was about 1,310, I think, 1,310 that were actually in use. So that was severely underutilized program. And I knew it coming in. It happened for a variety of reasons, but basically because of this, Kitsap County was losing about $5 million a year in federal rental assistance. So it was almost, we've talked about this, almost criminal, like we could not believe it. And so in fact, one of the sad repercussions from that was that when we got we got emergency vouchers, you may have recall this, during COVID came up with this program of emergency vouchers, and every housing authority who had a voucher program was granted these vouchers, and they distributed them on a kind of a weird calculation. But for Kitsap County, our calculation was we were supposed to get 56 of these vouchers. These vouchers were better than the housing choice vouchers in that you could pay more in rental assistance, and they also came with money for services. Unheard of for
That is
vouchers.
unheard of.
And you didn't have to compete for them, so they just gave them to you. So we were looking forward to getting these. There was requirements that you had to work with partnering agencies, so that was super exciting for us because we never really partnered with other agencies who were then going to give us referrals, so we weren't going to have to deal with a wait list. But when the vouchers actually came out, because we had underutilized our program for several years, we actually got 16 of those vouchers taken away from us. So our community only got 38. Now, that didn't go over well, obviously, with me, and I fought very hard, but I lost that battle, and I'm not used to losing, so that was sad. But we ended up with 38, and of the 38 right now, we have 32 that are leased up. We have 5 more that are almost through the process, and then 1 that is still shopping. So we've done really well with these, but it was a loss to this community. So as I explained this to my board and said, we have to be better with this utilization. So it became our goal. It's not as easy as you might think, because if somebody has a voucher, they still have huge challenges. Credit, poor rental history, poor credit, landlords that don't really trust our program. And then, probably the biggest thing is just the lack of affordable housing. So just having a voucher is not the golden ticket anymore. And so what we had to do is really put in programs and put in ways of really trying to overcome those barriers for the people that we serve. One of the things that we do is that all of the Bremerton vouchers and all of Housing Kitsap vouchers can go anywhere. So we don't have to just stick to Bremerton. Our Bremerton vouchers can go anywhere in Kitsap County or in Mason County, and the same with Housing Kitsap vouchers. So that was that has been going on for a long time. That preceded us. But the other thing that we did is we had to look at what our vouchers pay. So our vouchers are the criteria for what we pay is, again, based on a very complicated calculation from HUD called the payment standard. And that payment standard is based on what we call fair market rents. The fair market rent calculation is what HUD gives to us. And for Kitsap County, when they gave us the fair market rents for 2022, they were very low, and they've been low for years, and they were prohibiting us from being competitive. So our voucher holders, we're a unique situation. We're competing with the Navy, we're competing with Seattle. We're not that far away. And so if you look, actually, we're the 3rd highest cost of living in the state. So King County and Snohomish County, and then here in Kitsap County. And yet our fair market rent was far below those other 2 counties. So what we ended up doing is what do you call it, protesting? We fought back, and we said to HUD, there's one way you can go. We challenged. Yes. Yeah. I always get in trouble with HUD because I use words like punishing us and they don't appreciate it. So we said, there's one way you can get your fair market rents up, and that is to challenge them and say, we're going to do our own study. This is very expensive. The Housing Authority, we don't have the expertise to do it ourselves. So we had to hire Washington State University to do this. Bigger housing authorities, King County, Snohomish, they're very used to doing things like this, challenging. That's where I learned how to do this. And so I said, no, we're going to do this. It cost us $80,000. Housing Kitsap had a little money, so very little that they couldn't spend on anything else. So they gave us about $40,000. I think we split it.
I can't remember the total,
but
it was expensive.
It was expensive, and we were sweating it because they have to have people respond to this survey. And if you don't get enough responses, HUD won't accept it. So just by the skin of our teeth, we got enough responses, and HUD said, yeah, you're right. So they raised our fair market rents here by 20%. And not only does that help the housing authorities, but there's several other agencies that rely on that calculation that then got increased funding because our fair market rents went up. But what it did for the housing authority and for the vouchers is it quadrupled the amount of units available. So all of a sudden our voucher holders are finding places to live, and it was amazing. So I'll just kind of skip forward, but in the last 2 years, we have now housed over almost 200 voucher holders than we had in 2021. And, I actually get, goosebumps when I think about this, because think about the lack of affordable housing here and how have we been able to do this? And it's not just us, it's because we have all these community partners helping our clients to find housing. Part of that 200 is Pendleton Place. I'm sure you've all heard of Pendleton Place. So that was 65 vouchers that were attached to brand new units. But still, we're at almost 150 that we're not. So it's been a pretty incredible feat.
Your success rate has increased by about 20%.
Yeah.
Voucher holder success rate because of the challenge to the FMR and the increased payment standard that then households could utilize increased by 20%. It was in the 30s and now it's.
How do these housing vouchers relate to Section 8 housing?
It is part of the
Section 8.
Section 8.
Yeah.
Section 8 is the Section 8 of the,
Code, federal regulations.
no, it's Section 8 of the Housing Act of 1937 is
Yeah.
what, and it funds a variety of things. So the housing choice voucher is one of the things that it funds.
So typically everybody knows it as Section 8. I always refer to it as housing choice voucher, but that is essentially what it is.
Do you mind defining affordable housing? If that's the general term that you're using, or if that is a very specific subset of housing
Yeah.
and what criteria so that's clear? Because I think that term gets thrown around a lot. And
Absolutely.
it's
And
used
in different,
ways.
in different
Yes.
contexts.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So for us, affordable housing is based on somebody's income. Primarily, we service people at 30% of the area median income or less. We are allowed to serve up to 50%, but most of our program participants and residents are at 30% or below. And area median income, I brought that because everybody always asks me this question.
Good.
And I'm like,
Ninth one.
yeah, so area median income for 2-bedroom is 30,850 annually. So it's people below that.
What is it, a 2-bedroom? Is that what you said?
For a 2-bedroom, yeah. Mhm.
One more time, Jill, you said, was it in the, you now have 200 more vouchers due to your challenge.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 years?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
200 more vouchers utilized, not
Okay.
given.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
The utilization of
key.
the vouchers that were in place was very low. And so it's increased. The utilization has increased by 200.
And we still have probably 400 available. So we have
Wow.
lots of strategies to try to get our utilization up. So we also do affordable housing management. We do affordable housing development. And then Heather's Housing Authority actually has kind of a unique program. So I'll let you talk about that. We don't do a lot of home ownership. We would like to get into that, but Heather, what do you want to talk about?
Sure, we do something that I have always affectionately called the Sweat Equity Program, and perhaps you've heard about it. It's a homeownership program for first-time home buyers. And what happens is you have to qualify for a loan. So generally there has to be some earned income. The loan is through rural development, and you spend a year to 18 months helping build a neighborhood. So perhaps there are 10 builders in one area, and those 10 builders work together on all 10 houses. And at the end of that, and the Housing Authority provides technical assistance and runs the job site. And there are some things that are contracted out, and all of that is funded by RD. And at the very end, we have what we call a key ceremony, which is where homeowners that have worked all of this time, 35 hours a week, I think they have to commit, and they can do that through volunteer hours or, on their own, they can do it. But frequently these people are working. So can you imagine adding 35 hours a week to your 40-hour-a-week job? So it's a very, very hard program. But at the end, they're homeowners. And they're homeowners with significant equity, generally, significant equity that moment. So the house might cost them, $250,000, $300,000 to build, but the minute it's occupiable, it might be worth more. So it's building generational wealth, it's creating first-time homeowners, it's creating neighborhoods that work together to create their neighborhood. It's one of my favorite programs in the whole wide world. And Housing Kitsap has been doing this particular program. I think when I talked to our single-family director, I think he says there have been thousands of first-time homeownership opportunities created through this program over the years.
Oh my gosh, how long has it been in existence, do you think?
A long time. It might, I have paper, I have flyers. I don't know how long. I do know that it was happening where I lived previously 35 years ago. So my guess is that, you know, in the 30-year realm.
Can people volunteer, outsiders who are not involved in actual?
You can, and so people can have some of their hours made up by volunteer hours, absolutely. It would be for a specific particular
Okay.
homeowner, or you, like if you say, I want to volunteer 10 hours, they could be distributed to the builders. Yeah, and there have been, I think we had a bicycle trek, builders that were coming through and stopping at different homeownership sites like these, and they came and they spent a day or two or a weekend providing, you know, physical help in building these homes. It's a fantastic program for homeownership.
And does it have to be multiple houses in an area, or can it just be one here and one there?
It's multiple, because how Housing Kitsap does it is Dean's always looking for land. So he finds a bit of land that can be developed into a plat, and then he gets it developed and he gets all the infrastructure in, and then we turn the lots over or sell the lots to the households, and then we build, and then there's a whole other transaction. Yeah. And I think my understanding or my belief, I've not documented this or I've not researched this, but building together as a neighborhood, I think creates that community, which I think is really fantastic.
We've kind of already talked a little bit about this, but the people that we serve, they mostly come off our wait list. We open the wait list generally once a year, and it's only open for about a week. Anybody can apply during that week. We always say apply whether if you think you may need housing, because it's going to take a while for you to come up on that wait list, so your circumstances might change. So we encourage anybody that's kind of at that 50% or below to get on our wait list when it opens. During the last wait list, we had about 2,400 people apply. And so that's going to take us quite a while to get through. But, you know, things happen. So we plan that we will probably open the wait list each year, but we don't guarantee that.
So of those 2,400, how many are actually selected?
So we, the way that our wait list works is we take everybody who applies and we put them on the wait list. It used to be that we would select 300 to 600. We've stopped doing that just because the community feedback to us was that's not fair. You know, we have 2,400 people apply and then you pick 600, and there would be people that would apply every year and never get picked. So what we're doing now is we put everybody on the wait list, but that creates a much longer wait list. So, you know, either way we do it, we get a little bit of scrutiny, but we felt like this was probably the fairest way to do it.
And is it like, so does it go in some kind of order, or is there
So what
criteria that needs to be met?
So what we do is anybody can apply during that week at any time, and that doesn't dictate your place on the wait list. At the end of a week, we randomly sort them. And so it's just a computer program, and then it goes 1 through 2,400. So, yeah.
You have preferences, correct?
So we do have preferences, and this is, so thank you, Heather, for bringing that up. We do have preferences. So you can, there is ways you can kind of go to the top or actually not even be on a wait list and still get a voucher. Preferences it's a unique problem because depending on who you choose, you're not choosing someone else. And if you like, we'll have a preference for veterans, we have a preference for homeless, we have a preference for people fleeing domestic violence. We have a whole list, a whole slew of preferences. But what we try to do is have other agencies refer those people into our program so that the Housing Authority isn't necessarily picking. The problem comes in is that if you give somebody who has a preference a voucher, then you're not giving somebody on the wait list a voucher. And so that, you know, we get, it's just a hard thing to balance. We feel like a preference for Kitsap County, a preference strategy is needed because people that come in through the preference strategy are more successful in finding housing because they usually come in with a caseworker or another agency helping them. And in this community where our vouchers are so underutilized, it makes sense for us to do this, but we have to be really careful of how we do it and who gets those preferences.
So those are in addition to the 2,400 or whoever is on the wait.
They're included, yeah, so we only have those 2,400 vouchers, so, they're included in that. So if we give somebody one of those, we don't get an additional one.
And is there a residency requirement? I know my sister works in housing in Reno,
Mhm.
and they evidently have a more generous program than some. And I know they get people that are moving there from out of state because that's what they.
That's a great question, yeah, so when we,
That's what they, that they think they're going to be on the list right away and get.
Yeah.
And she said it's really become quite a problem.
yeah,
I think it's regulatory, if I'm not mistaken.
so anybody can apply from anywhere in the country. When we open a wait list, we can't control that. So
So anybody in the country can. apply.
anybody in the country can apply, but in order to get a voucher, you have to live in Kitsap County or Mason County. So if somebody from Reno applies, they would have to move here. Now, once they move here or if they live here and they get one of our vouchers, you have to stay here for 1 year. After that, you can, what's called port, you can go anywhere in the country that has a housing choice voucher program. It gets a little bit complicated. Most of the people, though, remain in Kitsap County once they get a voucher.
And some people don't want to move. right?
Yeah,
They want to use their voucher immediately where they're living, and sometimes we can't do that.
yeah, it
sometimes.
doesn't.
So do they combine counties? Cause you keep mentioning Mason County, so you said you guys King County. and-
Yeah, so
That's huge, so.
typically they don't. This housing authority is unique. So many years ago, Mason County, they have their own housing authority that's very small. I think they have maybe 200 units of affordable housing. They don't have public housing. They used to have a voucher program, but that got, I can't even explain how this happened because I've never heard of it before, but somehow Bremerton Housing Authority took over their voucher program. So we don't even know how many vouchers were allocated to Mason County, but they all belong to Bremerton, which is different than Housing Kitsap. They have their own and we administer them, but for Mason, they don't have their own. Our board has been very clear with me and with our housing authority that we don't want Mason left behind. So that is why HUD allows us to go anywhere in Kitsap or Mason County with our vouchers.
We have a question.
Oh, yes, Pat.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I mean, yes, excuse me. The question that I have is, do either of your authorities or combined working together, which sounds like a great idea to me, work with the public land trust that would be available, I think, in Kitsap County? I'm not sure, but it seems as though that there's been some land set aside that used to be owned by the state or the county or whatever, to build some of the housing that you were talking about earlier. And I was wondering if there was any cooperation or if you contacted each other regarding public land trusts.
I know that our housing authority has discussed it. My board is unique in that my board is made up of the 3 city mayors, the mayor of Poulsbo, the mayor of Port Orchard, and actually not a mayor of Bainbridge, although she's now the mayor, a council person, an assignee from Bainbridge. She just was voted mayor. So we have 3 mayors. We have the 3 county commissioners who are on our board, and we have 1 resident on our board. And so because we have elected officials on our board, we hear about these things more. Housing Kitsap hasn't been in a position to be able to sort of go look for a bit, where can we build again? Although it was the leading developer in the community for quite some time of affordable housing, we are getting to the point where we are starting to do that. And so I've heard that, I've heard about the Housing Trust Fund. I think that we have received money here, there, and the other place, but I can't speak to how. And I know that it is something we want to investigate.
Yeah, and Bremerton Housing Authority does not work with that public land trust. But we're open to it. So we're doing new things all the time.
Can somebody lose their vouchers, their behaviors?
Oh, yeah, yes. That does happen. We try to keep it rare because if they don't succeed with the housing authority, there's very few choices after that. So we work really hard to try to help people in the position of potentially losing either a voucher or a unit to be successful. But yes, it does
How much do you work with, you mentioned Mason County, for example, and in Puget Sound generally, there's been a kind of traditional, region-wide cooperation. Do you feel like there are any kinds of, relationships with King County, Pierce County? I mean, 'cause as someone who is actually living in a burden situation,
Yeah.
I'm here in Bremerton because of that, because it was better than
Yeah.
Tacoma at the time. So is that kind of cooperation something that is either happening or that you would like to have happen, just so that?
Cooperation as far as
Yeah, in what venue?
what way?
Well, you mentioned, okay, so you've got a pot that you're supposed to spend mainly on Kitsap, and now I know,
Mason.
but to my surprise, that Mason is involved, or you can use Mason as a source.
Mhm.
That kind of cooperation where, you're looking for wide.
So, yeah, the way to answer that is I'm I'm in touch with the other housing authorities. We both participate in the regional groups as executive directors, but our funding does not flow in either from them or to them, other than if somebody has a voucher and they go to King County and use it there, they can do that. And we paid King County for that, and vice versa if somebody from there moves here. But no, the funding is not fungible. It's very restrictive. So King County, Seattle Housing Authority, they get way more funding than we get, but they're not giving us any of that. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. You're welcome. We've already kind of talked about this, but the people we serve generally are at 50% or less of AMI. Primarily, though, they're at 30% or less. We do have some properties that are considered tax credit properties, and I'm not going to get into what all that means, but they were funded through the tax credit program. And in those properties, we can serve people up to 60% of AMI. Most of our households are rent burdened. So even if they're living with a voucher or living in public housing, they have to pay 30% of their income towards their rent. And when your income is very low, 30% is a lot. It doesn't leave a lot left over. So we try really hard to look at what our voucher holders are paying. And at any time, if we can pay more to lessen their rent burden within the restrictions that we have, we always implement that program.
And some of Housing Kitsap's tax credit properties actually have market units.
That's
So
good point.
they are not necessarily restricted by income.
Some of the things that we really look at when we're running these programs is how we can make people be successful. And for us, that means that we have to look at the barriers to them being successful, whether it's actually getting in a unit or staying in a unit. So a lot of our programs are meant to help people remove barriers. We have a program, an educational program for people who are new to renting, and it's called Rent Ready, where they go through a series of classes to get ready to be a good renter. This is kind of new. We partner with, like I said, KCR and other organizations to help our program participants. One of the challenges that we see is that they don't have security deposits. So in the last 2 years, we've had funding, and other agencies, and including the city of Bremerton, have given us money to do things like rental assistance and pay security deposits. We partner with other agencies to help them do affordable housing. For instance, Kitsap Mental Health Services, they actually are the owners. They're called a partner, but they actually own Pendleton Place. So a lot of people think it was Bremerton Housing Authority, but it is not. We manage it. We provide the vouchers for it. We do all of their compliance because they have a lot of funding that came in that has very strict compliance that they have to follow. Bremerton Housing Authority is we are a leader in compliance, so a lot of agencies rely on us to do that compliance for them. And we try to really be a great resource to the community. So the most recent example of that is really with KCR. They're trying to buy a property right now. We actually found that property and took it to them. We would have loved to have purchased it ourselves, but we weren't quite ready to we just didn't have the funding in place, but we thought that they did. So we took that opportunity to them, and they're in process of buying that. We will manage that for them. If they are successful in getting the grant, we'll manage the property and we'll do all of their compliance. As we talked about, we're really focused on increasing our voucher utilization and increasing our hard units. And then we also are focused on implementing new voucher programs. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are focused on?
Sure.
Kind of the same things.
Kind of the same things, although Housing Kitsap wasn't quite as healthy as Bremerton was when I started. So I've been focused on getting Housing Kitsap to be in a healthier state, to be in compliance with all of its funders. And Housing Kitsap has multiple funders. We have USDARD, we have tax credits, we have home. I think we do actually have Housing Trust Fund, if that's what you were talking about. We have CDBG, we have USDA when it comes to the Homeownership Program, plus we have public housing, plus we have the vouchers that Bremerton Housing Authority administers, and we have something called Section 8 project-based, or called PBRA, which is also part of the Section 8 program, but it's not a voucher, it's a unit-based subsidy. So you move in, you're subsidized, you move out, you're not. So we have a lot of programs. So we are focusing on making sure we're running those correctly. We are looking for, we have one parcel of land that we're hoping to develop on, and we're starting to look at how to make that happen right now. We are partnering with, there's another slide, partnering with City of Poulsbo. No, that's what are your recent successes? Any event. We are working with the City of Poulsbo on developing an affordable housing site there. So we are focused on essentially the same things. I did apply for, there were 2 new voucher funding opportunities. I don't know that Housing Kitsap had applied for any voucher funding opportunities recently. So I did, I got 1 in and 1 program application there. So looking to expand what we do.
I have a question on accessible housing. Do you have a percentage that are set aside for accessible housing?
We do, yes.
When there's development.
Is there a preference? Is that on the preference list?
Not for no, it's not on our housing choice voucher preference. Actually, no, I'm not sure if that.
It would, it's the development
Yeah.
tenant selection plan. So if you are a person who needs a mobility unit or a site or hearing unit, you would jump if one of those units became available, because we're required to do that. If there's nobody on the waiting list for that unit, then we could house somebody who doesn't need those accessibility features, but we are required to ask people if they need those features. And if they do, we are required then when one becomes available to work through to get them.
Yeah, and the other thing that we do is if a voucher holder is in a private, with a private landlord, and they need something comes up and they need that, we have funding that we can pay for modifications if it's reasonable for the landlord.
Okay.
How many like are the units do you guys own?
That's a great question. We own 578.
Housing Kitsap has 888.
So are some of those apartments and those in that number, you count those, or?
Some of them
So
are
is it-
apartments.
Is it?
Units,
They're
those are
units.
units.
That's what I
So it
meant,
could be
yeah.
a single family dwelling or a unit in an apartment complex.
Yeah.
So that's how many units of housing.
How many apartment complexes do you guys have?
We have 8.
I think we have, I want to say it's in the teens.
Yeah, you have more than that.
I haven't counted.
We're
We have-
new, we're
we
new.
have several, we have,
But to
we're
me, that's
throughout the
just
county.
good- That's just good to know that.
yeah, we're throughout the
you guys
county.
actually.
We have, I
Yeah.
want to say 4 or 5 in Port Orchard. We have one in Kingston. We have several in Bremerton. We have some in Poulsbo, but those are single family dwellings actually.
Yeah, so what are the ranges of housing types that you have? I hear apartment complexes or single family housing. Do you guys have any of that kind of missing middle building type, smaller units? Like Bremerton has really, because of the Navy, the shipyard, Bremerton has some really incredible small types of multifamily dwelling units with like the little triplexes, like multiple on one lot, that kind of thing. You guys own that? Are you looking into investing in those kinds of housing types to create density in a city that is already dense but has vacant lots and things like that to kind of fit in with the character of the city?
We own one complex that is all duplexes and triplexes. The other 7 are primarily apartment complexes. But we also, in fact, this is on this slide, we also just purchased 5 single-family homes, 3 4-bedroom homes for bigger families that were struggling to find housing. And then I don't know about you guys.
We have single-family dwellings that are scattered throughout. Actually, they're mostly in North Kitsap. I get confused here because there's water everywhere. Sorry, I'm used to water being on one side of me. We also have, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. The Nordic cottages, which is what we're helping the city of Poolsbo develop, is a pretty high density little development. It's going to be 8 1-bedroom units for seniors is the plan. So it's fairly high density and fairly walkable.
And so I think we've talked about almost everything on this slide now. This is just in the last 2 years, some of the things we've been working on, the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, the Foster Youth Independence. So this is a new program. This is probably my favorite program. So this program is for youth aging out of foster care. We actually were given 25 vouchers for this program. As you can imagine, this is a clientele that really needs support. And so, as I talked about before, we have the vouchers, but we don't necessarily have any money for those to help them actually get into a unit to do the navigation, provide security deposits. We don't have any of that money. But in spite of that, Kitsap County actually has partnered with us to fund those services. So they are working with a nonprofit here in Kitsap County called Olive Crest. Olive Crest works with the youth aging out of foster care. They help them find units, and they work with the landlords, trying to find landlords to actually rent to them. The program started about a year ago this time, although we had been planning it for a year prior to that. And right now we have 13 youth that are in homes. We have 5 more that are going to be getting their vouchers in the next 2 weeks. So once we hit our 25, we're actually percentage-wise, Kitsap County is the highest in the state for the use of the Foster Youth Independence
Oh, I
Program.
didn't know that. Congratulations, that's great.
So, I mean, we get national attention for this all the time. Usually national attention is not always great for Bremerton Housing Authority. Or Housing Kitsap. But, we're changing that every day. So,
Every day.
but this program has been super successful, and it's just great to see these youth that are getting into housing. Once we hit our 25, Heidi already said we're going to give Housing Kitsap 25. So we're just looking forward to continued success in that program. We talked about the fair market rents. Getting those raised was a huge thing for our families. As I kind of alluded to earlier with your question, one of the with the emergency vouchers, when they went to large families, they were not having success because there wasn't any large units available. So we have a big presence up in the Bay Vista area, and I'm sure, as you know, there's a lot of development going on up there. So I was just driving around one day, and I was like, you know what, we should just purchase some of these houses, because they're big houses. We're up there already. We have a presence. And so I went back to the board and said, hey, I know we have limited funding, but if I can get a grant, would the board be willing to put up some matching funds for us to buy? And I said 3 houses at the time. And the board was like, yeah, even if you don't get the grant. And I was like, whoa, because I'm a finance person. I'm a CPA and my background is in finance. So I always look for a return on our investment. It was very important to me. So I said, well, we're going to apply for this Housing Trust Fund grant. And I noticed that all of the Housing Trust Fund money was going to Seattle and new developments, brand new developments. So I said, we're going to put in for a brand new development, only it's going to be a much smaller ask than all of these other people going for this grant. So we asked for $1.5 million. And last December, we were awarded that grant. It was better than Christmas, and I have 3 kids. And so I was like, it was a great day. And it was really a great day for the Housing Authority, because we've had so many challenges, and our staff, it's hard on them. It's hard to do this work. And so when we got that grant, it was kind of just like this weight was lifted from us. And we went and we bought the 5 houses, and they're fully occupied now. So that was a huge moment for us. you know, the Housing Trust Fund, I mean, we had a lot of support from our local officials, so I think that helped, but, and as a result, other agencies are now applying for this it's called rapid rehousing money. And it was, I think, the first time in Kitsap County in a very long time that we got that sort of funding. But now we have people going in for $6 million. And so that's the latest grant, but people are encouraged that Kitsap is getting notice and we're getting funds. So
So Jill, those were brand new houses built?
$500,000 homes. Yeah.
Okay, wow, that helps. I have a couple other questions.
Sure.
But okay.
Yeah.
So numbers of staff in both organizations.
So we have about 100 staff. I haven't talked very much or at all about this, but half of our staff actually work for the multi-family side of HUD. They do kind of the same work as the Housing Authority, but I'm not going to explain this well, but so HUD has kind of two sides to it. There's the public housing side and there's the multifamily side. In multifamily, the programs are similar, but HUD actually contracts with Bremerton Housing Authority to do the reviews for those units, and those units for us are in all the state of Washington, Idaho, and Nebraska. So half of our employees work for that division of the Bremerton Housing Authority, and the other half work on the public housing side and the Section 8 side.
So that the multifamily side would be doing the compliance part.
That's right.
Yeah. That's
There's only 12 housing authorities in the nation that do this work, and Bremerton is one of them.
for heaven's sake.
Yeah, so, and we've been fighting to keep that work. So we actually, HUD has for years been saying they were going to rebid this work. And there's been kind of a push to get housing authorities out. And our housing authority years ago sued HUD to keep this work, and we were successful. And so now we're kind of known as the people that will fight back. So we just keep it going. And they actually, this last year, they came out with a proposed rebid of this work. And it actually was, again, trying to keep housing authorities out. And so if they had gone through with it, we may not have been able to keep that work. All the housing authorities that do this work came together and fought back. And in fact, in the new budget, the Congress wrote in there that if HUD, they had to withdraw their proposal. And this is the language it is pretty incredible. They had to withdraw their proposal. And if they were to reissue it, there's language that says they cannot prohibit housing authorities from bidding on the work. So we feel like confident. So anyways, they HUD has told us, okay, they told all the housing authorities, and it also affected state finance agencies that they're not going to rebid the work anytime soon. So we feel like we have another 3 to 5 years. And it's really important because we make a profit on this. And for housing authorities, because a lot of private agencies do this work as well. But for housing authorities, why it's so important is because we take that profit and we supplement the housing authority where we're actually losing money in our programs. So it's all of what our argument to HUD has been, why wouldn't you want housing authorities to do this? Because we're taking it and putting it back into your programs. And if we don't do that, then you're going to have to give us more money from where?
Somewhere.
You know, so it was quite a compelling argument.
And Housing Kitsap has.
About 50.
Okay.
I think this is your slide, actually.
May I ask one more question? This is probably, I don't know, it's very basic. How and when, am I understanding correctly that BHA administers HK programs, but
No.
Not
You
all
manage.
They administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program for
Okay.
Housing Kitsap, and that started 100,000 years ago. A long time ago, in the heyday of Housing Kitsap's development era, where there was a lot of developments being done, it was thought that Bremerton, it would be better to have Bremerton Housing Authority do it because that's what they did. And Housing Kitsap focused on development. And Housing Kitsap wants to do development, but it also wants to expand to the greatest extent possible of, those types of programs for the community. I mean, the more we can get together, like like Joe was saying, the 25 that they got for Bremerton, there's still 25 out there for Housing Kitsap. So once Bremerton gets theirs, Housing Kitsap, you know what I'm saying? So it's like working together. The sum of our parts is much greater than us divided. Yeah. And so we administer our own rental housing programs. We administer our public housing program. We administer the tax credit program, the USDA RD program, the project-based Section 8 program. I know there's one home program, housing trust program. I do the same one.
You're very complicated over at Housing.
We're very complicated.
We're a
Yeah.
lot less complicated. here.
All of that development required a lot of different regulatory agreements for financing as well as for compliance with the rental programs. So it's very complicated. I call one of our developments in Polsbo Frankenfjord because it has so many layers. It's like you've got housing trust fund, you've got home, you've got USDA. I don't remember all the programs that are in it, but that frequently is what has to happen in order to get affordable housing developed. So, and the predecessor who did all that development, he's a master at it. Did you have a question?
I'm wondering what the sense, and definitely the perception may be based in whether factually on the NIMBY.
Oh, it's something. It exists.
More in Kitsap than you've noticed in your other.
I don't know what that is.
Not in my backyard. I want more affordable housing, but don't put it right next to me.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've noticed it more. I've noticed it about the same. I don't know about your perception.
I would say that probably about the same. Yeah.
Which is.
People don't, it's
Big
getting
breaks
better.
there.
I'll say it's getting better. And especially because the city of Bremerton is constantly, they're trying to enact policies that make it easier to have more affordable housing. And to have, like, for people to build, what are they called? Additional dwelling units on their property?
ADUs.
Yeah, so it's,
That increased density.
yeah, so it's getting better, but I don't have any data to back that up.
Yeah, I don't think it's horrible. I think, depending on the type of housing, like the ADUs are one thing, but if you want to put a supportive housing development somewhere, that might be another thing. So, making sure services are in place and available, I think would, in the long term, help that.
I think it's not as big of a problem for housing authorities as it is for like homeless shelters and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, like the one on Mile Hill. I used to live
Exactly.
forward to this girl and was very upset about
Yes,
that.
but
Like,
it's-
it's right on the transit line. This is a great one.
And it's
Right,
happening.
right. Yeah, and it's happening.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about Housing Kitsap's, recent successes, which aren't quite as noteworthy, although they are very noteworthy
Yes.
to our staff and our board. That we are now, I don't know if you've seen that they were not up to date when I came on board with financial reporting, which has a lot of negative impacts on the Housing Authority, including some sanctions. So we're completely up to date. Our last audit, in fact, had no findings, so that was fantastic. We've actually, since I've been here, which is only a year and a half, had 3 key ceremonies. So that's about 30 new homeownership folks. And so that's pretty exciting. The city of Polsbo, that collaboration is new and we're very excited about that. Port Orchard had some money that they needed to use and we were able to partnership with them. We have an owner occupied rehab program. So people have to income qualify and they're perhaps homeowners, but they can't afford to do some rehabilitations. Think grandma and grandpa who've lived in their house for 30 years and they need a new roof, but they're living on Social Security. And so we administer a program where we help fund and grant money to get that done. And the city of Port Orchard partnered with us because they had some money they needed to use in the city of Port Orchard. So that was pretty exciting. And we are in the thick of developing the new plat in Port Orchard that we call Riverstone. So that's exciting too.
So Riverstone, so Nordic Cottages is something
Different.
different.
Nordic Cottages is not homeownership, it's an apartment development, and but the self-help program in Port Orchard, I get them all confused because they all have 3 names.
Oh, yeah, and that's, right, and that's Port Orchard, and this is Polsbo.
Correct.
Where is it located, the Nordic?
Cottages, that's a really good question because I'm not super familiar with the area. If you watch the city council meetings, it will come up, and I think there is a steering committee that post stuff on the website. It's a little tiny lot next to a church that I believe is walkable. to downtown. So it's kind of in the downtown area. I can get that if you want to get me your information.
You'll find it.
Yeah, I mean, I could actually probably look it up if you want. Okay.
I think we're getting to the end here. We've talked about this to like some of the challenges that we have. Shortage of landlords accepting vouchers, shortage of housing, and our voucher holders having to overcome barriers to leasing. Kind of the bigger one we have right now is a lack of capital funding for development. So we're always looking for money to develop. We have a 9-unit development project that we're working on right now, and I'm looking for money for that. And then the lack of funding for rental assistance and security deposits. We've had for the past 2 years a lot of COVID money, and that is now going away. So we want to keep these programs because they're super successful, but we need the funding.
Jill, and Heather, how do you go about recruiting landlords who are willing to accept vouchers?
We have a landlord liaison position, and she goes to all of the landlord meetings in Kitsap County. And then she does a lot of cold calling too to the bigger complexes. We had, like I said, the rent ready class. We try to reach out to the landlords and make sure that we're supporting them as much as possible. This year we sent 100 handwritten thank you cards to our new landlords, and those are like very little effort. Well, actually it wasn't a little effort. I'm not the one that had to write them. I just had to sign them. But but we got responses from landlords for doing that. They were like, "Thank you, Jill." And I was like, "Yeah, don't thank me."
Actually, that explains something. One of my staff, the manager at Kingston, because I think we leased up 21 people. She's like, "Jill, send me a thank you card."
Yeah, I mean, it's just like these little things that we're trying to do to make sure, because we know, our tenants, they have challenges, and so we need to support them, but we also need to support our landlords. So we try very hard.
What are there, what is that relationship with the landlord? Are there requirements and?
There are, so the lease is between the client and the landlord. We don't interfere with that. But then they also have a contract with us because we pay them directly. So we don't pay the participant, we actually pay the landlord our portion of the rental assistance. And the other requirement is they have to pass an inspection. And so this always freaks out all the landlords, like they're so scared of this inspection. It's not really that difficult, and it's mostly based on safety. So we send it, so that has to happen. If they don't pass the inspection, we give them a list of things that they need to do, and we work really closely to help them do those things. So I think over the last couple of years, it's been less scary to work with us. We have the best inspectors in the world. They're very friendly. The landlords really like them, and that's an important thing because they're out there, and we need our employees to be liked by our landlords. So we work really hard at customer service.
And when there is a difficulty, like how many chances does a person get?
Oh boy, it depends on the situation and the
Right.
severity of the
Yes.
issue. But yeah, I would say that many chances, and it depends on the landlord too.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
But they're willing to.
Right, and landlords have to be landlords, and I think
Right.
that's what I've seen as a barrier, that landlords think the housing authority is going to manage the property for them, and that's not what's happening. There is a tenancy addendum that needs to attach to the landlord's lease, and the landlord's lease does have to be acceptable to the housing authority. So there are rules that the landlord does have to comply with. But there are many landlords who very successfully utilize, rent to housing choice voucher holders, and they are happy, and they call housing authorities, say, I have a unit, I have a household. So, but one bad tenant can really, it's tough. And that's why, as Jill was saying, you need an excellent relationship with your landlords to make sure that if there's something going on, that the housing authority can do whatever is in its power to help, prevent that from continuing.
And the truth of the matter is that, especially during COVID, we were still paying rent and raising rent. So we were actually, a really good source of income for landlords. And when renters didn't have to pay rent, and a lot of them weren't, we were still paying. And the other thing is, Section 8, it kind of has a bad reputation, but really when you look at the data, our tenants are no more likely to, ruin a unit than in the private rental, so The other great thing about our tenants, and the data shows this, is the average amount of time they spend in the unit is 7 years compared to 3 years outside of the program.
And I imagine it's a higher turnover in this community because of the naval base, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
So you would have a
exactly.
longer,
Yeah,
you would have a longer rental term versus perhaps the 1 year that somebody was stationed
Exactly.
here, right?
so we're not a bad deal.
And it's, it's what, 60 to 70% generally that's paid on behalf of the household of the rent.
Could you describe the circumstances of the fostering out renter? How does that,
The foster
what does
youth,
it look? Yeah,
the foster youth program, that's gonna be Jill, because I have not administered that. program.
So the
So-
question,
What living circumstances are they in? I mean.
when they come into the program,
They're aging out of foster
they're
care.
aging, yeah, so they might be in a foster care family situation, but they're aging out, and so they're not gonna be able to stay. with
So
the family.
what are they moving to?
They're
What does
moving
it
to
look
rental,
like?
so you either an apartment or a house, just their own private unit. Yeah.
But they wouldn't have any rental history,
Nope.
credit history, a security deposit, any of that, and they don't have parents to
To help
help
them.
them.
Right.
So it's you guys helping facilitate.
Well, it's
Well,
not so
the-
much
it's
us,
The county.
so the
yeah.
county is paying Olive Crest to do that. And that's why we've been so successful. A lot of other housing authorities don't have a county willing to pay for that. And without that, we wouldn't be successful either. So
Oh, because it's all Cresta foster care.
they are,
So they're
Yeah.
helping their,
People who are
youth
aging out.
yes,
to find.
that's right.
Opportunities.
Yeah.
after.
Can they do shared housing?
They can do shared housing, but Olive Crest has, there's challenges with that,
Got it.
with putting,
Two
these-
foster youth.
exactly, in the same unit, so we have not done any shared housing. Yeah, and then, okay, so this is kind of Housing Kitsap.
We've had,
Challenges.
we are the same as any other employer in this employee environment. We aren't as competitive as I would like us to be, although we're getting better in terms of hiring staff, our staff moving. So that's been kind of the whole time I've been here. It's been kind of an issue. Lack of capital funding for development, that is absolutely something that we are starting now to really look seriously at, to see where and what is out there and what can we utilize, because as I think I said, we do have a vacant lot that is slotted for development and we'd like to build on it. We'd like to build some affordable units. And lack of land. The single family director who is always finding land for the self-help program, I'm gonna have to say, okay, that one's for development. That one's not, because he like finds these big flats and perhaps it's a better use. I don't know. We'll have to start working through that. And then, the last couple of years have been difficult because of the eviction moratoriums. We are landlords. We are the landlord to the residents of our developments. And so many residents just decided, even if their rent was based on their income, they weren't going to pay rent, or they did not let us know that they lost a source of income, so they just stopped paying rent. And so, we're just like any other landlord. We have to work through all of the eviction moratoriums. We have to work through all of the tenant landlord law. And boy, I thought California was liberal. Whew, this state is very, very tenant friendly and getting more so, which I think is in response to the homeless situation. And I don't necessarily disagree, although it does at times make it difficult for landlords.
I agree.
Can I ask a question? This is kind of a big picture question, so it's out of bounds to say so, but you alluded at the beginning of your talk, that the sort of core problem here is that we're in a housing crisis, not just the Puget Sound, but it's pretty bad here. And what we need is just more housing. Are there, and I realize this is outside your purview, but are there things that you kind of maybe only in your imagination wish would happen or could happen that would help supply? I mean, just talking about supply, but even the more supply there is, the more likely it may be affordable in time. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, funding, we just need money to build. I think that there is land that we could develop, but there's a lack of funding. And when the funding comes down, it's so complicated. that, you know, it's hard to, and you have to compete. So if there was more funding available, easier to access, we would do more development.
I also have heard developers talk about, you know, what it takes to get something developed, all of the
It's
hoops
really
that you have to
difficult.
jump through to develop something. And I read something somewhere recently that was being looked at is how can we make it easier? Like,
Yeah.
the permit process, how can we make it easier to get through all of those hoops? And as I said, I came from California for a long, long time, so Washington State has some different, is different in many ways. And I don't know all of those intricacies yet because I've been focused on a few other things. But I do think that the actual ability to develop, making that easier could help. But there's a lot going on currently in Kitsap County. It's not affordable. There's at least 2 developments going in on Wheaton or Warren. I always get Wheaton. Yeah, there's 2 ginormous ones happening there. There's some happening in Port Orchard that I'm aware of. So some
Yeah,
things
that
are,
was something I've noticed too, being here in the past couple of years, but there is actual building going on.
it's
and
finally
it's
happening.
denser,
Yeah,
you
that's
know, it's
denser.
not mixed use yet, but
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe in view of that, what you're saying, if you have any opinions on or following at all the I-135 initiative, this is Seattle. This is the one based on the Vienna, you know, century-long housing program.
I'm not familiar with that at
Yeah,
all.
I'm not either.
Okay, never mind.
Is it Vienna as in not
As in Vienna, it's based on that, and also, you know, Singapore, for example, most people live in the same kind of housing as. What they do basically is they kind of give, they support it at every step of the way. So they buy land, then they, you know, make it affordable, and when it's built out. So there's a regular, something called the public developer, and it's.
Oh, I
something
have,
that would
yeah,
be
I have seen, I've been
So-
reading about this.
I'm interested in this because when you look around, particularly a place like Seattle, that you start with very expensive ground,
Mhm.
and then, you know, we're going too slow. And I don't know how big the need is and thing. I think that's starting to turn around just because
a little bit?
prices,
Yeah.
you know. But it seems like there's no way for private developers who, you know, quite rightly are in it for profit. They can build a lot of, you know, high-end, you know, I'm thinking of Seattle now just because they're the biggest example. But there's lots of cranes, there's lots of buildings going up.
Mhm.
There's, you know, buildings that are being taken down, so they can put several times as many, you know,
Some of that
tenants
though
in
is
them.
mixed use.
But
just
what
so you
I
know.
think the idea that it's gonna be supported publicly seems like the only way to get away from the profit model, which just isn't at the moment delivering. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've read a bit about this, but I wouldn't be competent in answering that, so no.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Just wondered if you had thoughts.
So
Thank
you're
you.
saying the development that's by Fred Meyer and Wilco is not, I mean, it's like 300 units, right? Or something.
Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
private developer.
Yeah.
What-
And is
what
it
I-
gonna be expensive?
I
Is
don't
that-
know, but what will happen is the folks who want to go into a new apartment will open up units for voucher holders or, you know, folks who come in on a ship. So it will create a shift in the rental market, and it'll create a good shift in the rental market, I think, in
So
terms
all
of our
developments,
clientele.
Yeah, more housing is more
More
housing.
More housing.
exactly.
My issue,
We're-
though,
yeah.
is that it isn't keeping up with demand in any way,
No.
shape, or form.
No.
We
That's
agree with
my
that,
concern.
yeah.
And there is a study, the county and I want to say the city of Bremerton did. Was it?
Yeah, they
there,
did.
which talked about how many new affordable housing units are going to be needed.
And if you go on the county's website, that
You can-
study is
Yeah,
there.
and you know that the figures, they don't pencil out
No.
in favor of people needing housing.
Exactly.
So anyway, I
I
just
guess
wondered
that
if you're interested in that, because it's a different thing.
Yeah,
I guess that
yeah,
was
for
my
sure.
question too, so, based on what you do provide, how much more is needed? I mean, what's kind of the. what
It's
is-
endless.
Yeah, I don't have a
So you don't
number.
have a percentage, you like your survey, you know?
Okay, and I think I did not understand, so private developer in this big apartment unit, and then, but none of it, because it's
privately developed, none of those
They might,
units.
they might accept the voucher. I don't know. A landlord they can't say, well, I won't rent to you because you have a voucher, but they can say, no, I found a more qualified renter.
Or more, what happens is that they set their rents outside of our payment standards.
That,
Right.
that makes it
That's the
unaffordable.
biggest
Right.
problem.
I mean, that's what I would expect to happen. What
Yeah.
does that mean?
Payment standard is essentially the limit that can be paid on behalf of the voucher holder toward their rent. And there are other regulatory considerations in terms of how rent and HAP or housing assistance payments are calculated. So there, you have to start with unit size, you have to start with family size, you have to start with the payment standard, and then you work through the calculation. And then the unit has to be three things. It has to be rent reasonable, it has to be the appropriate size, and it has to fit within that calculation, or the household's not eligible for it. So those units.
So potentially 0 units
Right.
might go to.
If,
supportive.
of those units, depending on
Yeah.
what the rents are set at, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like right now,
And that's the story, that's the story,
That-
that's why,
yeah.
you know, so vital.
Well, and there are tax credits that are available to private developers.
There are.
Like new market tax credits.
Yep.
But it adds, because when developers, they're seeking these programs and
As
trying to
well.
stack them just like you guys are, and then it creates more regulations. So for example, I work in historic preservation and help people get the federal historic tax credits. And oftentimes they will then stack new markets, but they have different requirements.
Yeah.
And then when things don't
Yeah,
mesh correctly, it's like, what can we drop or what do we have to do? And then it becomes very expensive.
Yeah.
To make it happen. And sometimes those projects do require them to have a fixed amount of affordable housing
do.
within their mixed use development. But then if it becomes too expensive to follow the requirements, they'll drop that. So that they can have things pencil out, so they can make the most money off of their investment.
and that's why, that's one of the reasons is how Housing Kitsap has historically been a developer, right? It's historically developed housing. And then it sort of got a little bit, out of control and it had to stop so that it could sort of take stock and focus back on its mission. And it's been doing that now for several years. And I'm really excited that it looks like we're at the point where we can start having conversations about developing again. So that's very exciting for Housing Kitsap, and the board of Housing Kitsap, who are, electeds of all of these areas, are very, very supportive of that, and they want this housing authority to develop. So, once all of our ducks are lined up and they're getting there, we will be looking to see what we can do in terms of creating additional affordable housing and perhaps partnering with BHA.
and back to your question about the payment standard. So like right now, our payment standard for a 2-bedroom is about almost $1,900. But if you look at a 2-bedroom rental unit, they're much higher than that, like $2,200. But we are only allowed to pay our payment standard. So that restricts us somewhat.
And the household's not allowed to pay more than 40%. So,
of their income.
right, so it's.
They get shut
potentially
out a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
That's why it was so important for us to get that fair market rent raised.
increased.
So we also have a waiver right now that we can pay 120% of this, so it's actually higher, but we're still priced out in many instances, especially with the brand new units.
That's tough because we're basically trying to get people who are in, and again, I think I want more private developers. We just need more of everything, and we need it, in a much larger
Scale.
scale than we currently got.
Absolutely.
You guys are doing God's work, but, you're kind of restricted to using a teaspoon.
There's only so much we can do, yeah,
Right,
for sure. But we still keep going. I mean, we are making a difference, so like
Well,
yeah,
yeah, and
Yeah.
much more is needed.
much more.
No, absolutely, there's no argument there.
Yeah, we agree. So these are just some of BHA's strategic goals. We have 4 focus areas. One is listening to and caring for our residents and program participants. We take that very seriously. We feel honored to be able to serve this clientele, so we want to do it well. We focus on cultivating our relationships with our community and partners and our landlords. We're very focused on strengthening our financial position. We want to be a reliable resource for our community well into the future. And then we're focused on building our organizational capacity to support growth. And so we're looking to grow. We have a lot of internal projects going on right now. including we just hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion program specialist, and we're super excited about that work happening both internally and externally. So yeah, we have tons of projects going on, but they all fall within these 4 strategic areas. And then,
Housing Kitsaps aren't as exciting because they were.
why do you keep saying that? Like, you've done an amazing job.
So we're looking at, we have all of these, what I met Norm, what he called layer cake funding streams, right? Where we have bonds or new market tax credits or rural development or housing trust fund all in one development. And so as you can imagine, the regulatory compliance, both on the finance side and the housing side, is very extreme and very hard to maintain because sometimes they just flat conflict with each other. So we are looking at what we have, what can we do? That's a long-term, long-range goal. Eventually, I want to yank my housing choice voucher program out of Jill's hands. Not because they're not doing a good job at it, but just because I think that it would be beneficial for us to administer that program within Housing Kitsap. We do absolutely, as I said, want to develop additional affordable housing, and we have at least one plan in our sites. And we had a capital needs assessment done last year of all of our current structures, and we need to figure out how to get those things done. There's a lot of money needed for that. And then we also, we are looking at programs for residents and what we can do, as Jill said, to keep them successful. Housing Kitsap does have and has had a couple of eviction prevention programs during the COVID era. There was money for preventing evictions, and so we've robustly administered several of those. We have one supportive rental housing program that is intended to get somebody housed and keep them housed until another subsidy can come in and take its place so that it can be rotated out to another human being. So what I would like to see, because it takes a lot to get somebody on the program, it takes a lot to make somebody eligible or move somebody into a unit. And so if they're not successful, it's not in anybody's best interest. It's not in their best interest. It's not in the housing authority's best interest. It's not in the community's best interest. So eviction prevention or prevention from losing subsidy, I think, is a key focus that I would like our agency to focus on.
How do people know about is it 2 weeks of application? How does the word get out for people to know that your services are there?
So when we open the wait list, we have a marketing strategy. We advertise in the paper. We are members of the Housing Homeless and Affordable Housing Coalition. We do email blasts to all of the partnering agencies. So we try to get the word out far.
Is it always at the same time?
It's not always at the same time. So we have to strategize how we're going to market. And same with our public housing. When we open that wait list, same thing.
So when was the last time it was open?
We opened the Housing Choice Voucher wait list in May of 2022. We opened public housing
just recently,
like just within probably 2 months ago. And we're opening the project-based voucher wait list actually at the end of this month. We have a website, so everything's always on our website. We also have a Facebook campaign that we do when we open a wait list. So
this is really naive on my part, but why is it not open all the time?
It's a matter of, so we're closing every wait list that we can currently on the 17th, actually, because the wait lists were so robust and they became so stale and there was not wait list management happening, that you'd send out notices to people that their name was up for a unit and you would not hear from them, or the letter would come back. So if you have a wait list that's for 40,000 people long, and it's not manageable, it requires management of it. You have to manage a waiting list. So keeping them open forever is something you can do, but it becomes overly cumbersome.
what's that?
Don't they in Seattle or King County?
So King County Housing Authority does not. I don't know about Seattle Housing Authority, but some do, but it's just really hard to manage. So yeah.
And the way the voucher programs are funded, you don't receive funding to administer the program until somebody leases up right? So, and it has to be on the first of the month. So waiting list management has to be paid for within that lease up. So if you don't have people being successful leasing, it's a tough one. It's a,
Very difficult.
yeah, it's a very, it's doable and it's being done.
Yeah, some housing authorities do it that way, but we've chosen not to. We don't have the administrative fees to do that.
Yeah, the bandwidth.
I keep thinking that this is the last slide and it just keeps going. I don't know what I was. So,
I was just gonna ask a question. When you talked about rural, what are the, what defines rural and kind of how?
It's a program. So there's the HUD programs, and then there's the tax credit programs, which is a federal program that the IRS provides, tax credits to investors. HUD has the two different sides. I call it the PAH side and then the community development side. So community development side has CDBG, has the project-based Section 8, which is what they review on behalf of HUD their contracts. And they have a bunch of other things. They have the continuum of care funding for homeless services. The public and Indian housing side basically has public housing and vouchers. It's very, they have
two main programs.
They have a bunch of programs within those programs, but those are the two main funding pots. And so it's USDA Rural Development is the funding stream for that particular rental assistance program. Does that make sense?
So the development and the people are not necessarily living in rural areas.
Although, yeah,
Not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
It doesn't-
No,
it doesn't-
Yeah.
it's just the name of the
the name of
program.
the program, yeah.
Yeah. And this slide is just, how can the community help? We always need landlords. We always need advocates. Look for opportunities to develop and support housing stability.
You take volunteers?
Yeah, we do.
What kind of jobs would they do?
Well, I mean, we don't have a lot of volunteers. I think more on Housing Kitsap for their homeownership program. For Bremerton Housing Authority, mainly for the landlord outreach. We're always asking people to support us and be an advocate for us. Sometimes it's more organizations that volunteer rather than individuals, but if an individual comes to us and says, we want to volunteer, we will find an opportunity for you to do that.
And Housing Kitsap has a website as well. All of the developments are listed there, as well as notification that those waiting lists are closed. So you can see all of the different types of developments that we have and where they are. Volunteer-wise, the self-help program, people who are building their house with that 10 to 12 unit, group, can meet their construction hours with volunteers. And so they are required, I want to say it's up to 35 hours a week, depending on what's happening that week. On top of many people are working full time. So you can imagine that it's quite the work and it's quite the long haul for these folks, but the reward at the end is pretty heavy. So they can meet some of their work requirements with volunteer hours.
This is the last slide. I'm confident.
This is the last slide. This is our contact information. I brought business cards if people want them. There is a volunteer application on the Housing Kitsap website. I have not seen many come through. But yeah, we would take for sure in the self-help program, absolutely volunteers.
And I think that's it.